Okay. Hello and welcome to what is sadly our last Lehigh Valley Passport to History talk of the year, but it should be a great one as we're going to talk about the holidays. Tonight's program explores holiday traditions. We're going to hear from the Moravian Historical Society, Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center, and Longswamp Township's Historical Society. Each of our 30-minute videos highlight a different theme and discussion from the night's participating historic sites. And I encourage you, if you want to go back through Lehigh Valley Passport to History's Facebook page or Lehigh Valley with Love's Facebook page, and you can see all of the talks that we've had throughout the past year. I'm your host, George Wacker. We're going to talk a little bit about Passport to History. Lehigh Valley Passport to History is a partnership of 60-plus historic sites and resources in and around Pennsylvania's Lehigh and Northampton counties. The group helps to promote local tourism and shares historical events, tours, and exhibitions throughout the valley. Lehigh Valley Passport to History is funded in part with funding received through the County of Northampton's Hotel Tax Program, the Lehigh County Tourism Development Grant Program, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Visit lvhistory.org for more information, and that's what you're looking at on the screen. And I also want to say thank you to our sponsors, Lehigh Valley with Love sponsors, Michael Bernardin with Remax Realty, and Molly's Irish Grill and Sports Pub in South Bethlehem. I also want to make one quick notion, or announcement, I'm sorry. If you guys want to check out the Lehigh Valley with Love Holiday Lights map, I'm going to drop a link in the comments. We have a map of over 60 houses throughout the Lehigh Valley that are all dressed up for Christmas. They've been submitted by people throughout the valley, so this is a lot of fun. Check it out. But we are here tonight to talk with our guests. I'm going to bring you guys on, so get ready. We have Candace Perry with the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center, Susan Ellis with the Moravian Historical Society, and Marie Molly with the Longswamp Township Historical Society. Thank you guys for joining us this evening.
Thank you, George.
I'm going to turn off my festive music here, and we're going to get right into it with Candace. I know, Candace, you may have to leave. You're a busy woman, and you might have another meeting this evening. So we're going to let you get to it. And if you have to go during this, no offense taken. But let's talk a little bit about the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center, and then we'll go into the photos when you're ready.
Okay. Yes, I am representing the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center in Pennsburg in Montgomery County. But even though we are in Montgomery County, we do serve southern Lehigh County and eastern Berks County also. We are a organization that interprets the Schwenkfelder experience. The Schwenkfelders are an 18th century German-speaking Protestant group that came to Pennsylvania in a series of immigrations in the 1730s, but also local Pennsylvania German culture and heritage in general. And so that's what I sort of want to address tonight with speaking a little bit about Christmas and the significance of it or lack thereof. And what I'm really starting in the 18th century, and it's very hard to find tangible evidence of Christmas celebration in the 18th century, unless you're Moravian. And I know Susan will address that. But I have a few things that I want to show in a second. But certainly among the more devout religious Pennsylvania Germans, including the Schwenkfelders, probably the Mennonites, or I'm sure the Mennonites, and other devout groups like that, you are going to find very little Christmas celebration, no festivities, nothing in the 18th and probably early 19th century. These traditions did not evolve until much later. Do we know if they even were encountering the Beltsnickel, who is the fearsome character that comes and either rewards children or punishes children, usually on December 6th, which would be St. Nicholas Day traditionally in German culture.
He's kind of like Krampus, right?
Yes, Krampus.
Similar.
And Krampus was, in Germany, was a character named Ruprecht. And there was he was the bad guy associated with the good guy, St. Nicholas. So there were two dual personalities. And at some point, the Beltsnickel sort of got both personalities in one guy.
Right.
But we
He's
know,
like the,
but
the
we know
super Krampus. Yeah.
yeah, we know very little about this from the 18th century. Did they do this? Was it considered pagan or improper or not respectful of their faith? But if you look at old diaries from the 18th century of our Schwenkfelders in particular, they don't even acknowledge the day. Nothing
Hmm.
particular happened on Christmas Day. I don't find anything happening on St. Nicholas Day. And then we should also talk about second Christmas, which is the day after Christmas. I guess in English speaking places, that was Boxing Day.
Right.
But it was also another day of celebration was second Christmas, which is December 26th. But and often there were wholesome celebrations, but there were also wild and woolly celebrations of drinking and more belt snickle stuff and just general mayhem.
Oh,
But let's go on to examples of some Christmas greetings, some tangible evidence of Christmas
okay.
in the 18th century. So that's my first slide.
Sure.
So these Christmas greetings are very special. These all come from the collection of the Schwenkfelder. These are part of our Fraktur collection, which are Pennsylvania German decorated manuscripts. And these I am fairly certain are Moravian in origin. Not sure which Moravian community they are, but they are certainly Moravian in origin because the Moravians would have been the only group that acknowledged Christmas as we would understand it. So,
Hmm.
and here we have on two of the pieces. The first one, the 1798 piece, is a Moravian hymn, a verse from a Moravian hymn that also appeared in the Schwenkfelder hymnal. And then in the lower corner, another verse from a Moravian hymn, which we kind of don't quite understand this verse here. My German scholar colleague here at the Schwenkfelder feels it's a little more Easter sounding, but
Hmm.
this one too appears to be a Christmas greeting that is Moravian in origin. And then, of course, this little flower, it looks like it's just a little gift drawing to a young woman, and it's marked on the back December the 24th. So these are
Interesting.
some of the few pieces of very tangible evidence, and there are more of these little drawings out there. There's some in the Philadelphia Free Library collection, and probably others somewhere that are can be easily identified because they're tiny. They're just about the sizes I'm showing them here on the screen. But
Oh
what
wow.
was
Okay.
more significant, probably in terms of greetings in the 18th and early 19th century, was New Year's Day. That was something that the Germans were really very interested in, and I know that Marie is going to be talking about that herself. So these are Fraktur New Year's wishes, and there are many of these. I'm just showing you two from our collection. Um, one that is Schwenkfelder. The one on the left is a Schwenkfelder Happy New Year greeting, sometime from the late 18th century. Not sure really when it is. It's a funny looking little thing, isn't it?
It looks like those snowflakes you make
Yeah,
in school.
it's like what we would call Scherenschnitt
Yeah.
or paper cutting, cut paper
Hmm.
pictures. It looks like that, but it's an odd little
Yeah.
critter. And then I have another example of a more elaborate New Year's wish. We were very fortunate to get this. Of course, we don't have Fraktur from Virginia on any kind of major basis, but we have this wonderful piece, and it also is a New Year's wish. So these traditions, these German-speaking traditions, were being carried down to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and this piece is by a well-known maker of Fraktur from the Shenandoah. So this was one of the most common forms. You can also find these in the collection of the Free Library or at Winterthur. They have other versions of these, and probably some from the Lehigh Valley, because the Lehigh Valley was a great font of Fraktur making. Okay, And then there's another tradition of New Year's gifts. This is something that was certainly common in Europe, in not only in German-speaking areas, but in everywhere. And then if you go through newspapers from the 19th century, you will see that it was very common to give New Year's gifts. It was usually a small gift, but they also talked about things like jewelry and furs and all kinds of things that you might get for New Year's. But these gifts, these wonderful pieces of Frocktor, were made by Susanna Hebner, who is our Schwenkfelder female Frocktor artist. There weren't many of those. And she was one who was making Frocktor in the early 19th century, specifically to give as gifts to her nieces and nephews and other members of her family. So each one of these wonderful pieces, which contain lines of scripture, all those blocks of text you're seeing are actually lines of scripture, were made especially for one of her nieces and nephews. She had many from one brother. So these are just beautiful pieces. And I see somebody has a wonderful comment. Actually, these are quite large. They're about 8 by 11. They're almost the size of a regular piece of paper. It's hard to tell here. But yes, so part of this New Year's...
this is probably... These aren't copies. She's all making these all individually.
No, she made them all one by one.
Wow,
She made each person. Now, I should add, she was a single lady. She didn't have to look after a home for a husband and a family of her own. So these nieces and nephews were, I think, were very much a part of her heart and soul. So she made them beautiful things. And then one more from me, and this should segue nicely into what Susan's talking about, because this is a much later drawing from our Frocktor collection of a scene that everyone probably knows very well. People in the 19th century often enjoyed copying images out of Bibles or mass-produced prints, and this was probably one of those things. But it sets up the scene for the Christmas puts that Susan will be talking about, which started as, of course, a nativity scene and then grew into just wonderful things with all kinds of accessories and, of course, trains later on. So I think that'll do it for me. And
before we get into the puts, is there anything? I mean, I know we're at the end of the year, but is there anything going on in Schwenkfelder Library, or should people just kind of stay tuned for events next year?
I would say we have a big year coming up. We have a quilt exhibit that's coming from France, which is very special, of new quilts, new contemporary wall hanging quilts. And that will be here in the spring. So if you're interested in contemporary quilting, art quilting, please come to our website or Facebook page. And then also a very big Pennsylvania German food exhibit coming next summer. So yeah, we have a lot going on here and a lot to look forward to.
Okay.
And well, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much, Candace. We know you have to run, but we appreciate it, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. Okay. We're not going to stop. We're going to go right into Susan Ellis with the Moravian Historical Society. Before we begin, I know we're going to talk about the putts. But is there? Do you want to give people a little bit of an overview on the Moravian Historical?
Sure. Thanks, George. And that was great presentation by Candace. It reminds me I need to get down there to visit them. It looks like an amazing collection. So the Moravian Historical Society is one of the oldest historical societies in Pennsylvania. We're celebrating our 165th year this year. So been around for a long time, preserving and celebrating and sharing all of this Moravian history. Our museum has a really impressive collection of objects that tell the story of early America, including the first violin and the first piano known to have been made in America. So we're located in Nazareth, and we're open 7 days a week from 1 to 4, except for major holidays. We will be closed this coming weekend for Christmas Eve. Christmas. Yeah.
Okay, and I know Candace kind of set you up here. We're going to go right into this. We just have basically a bunch of photos that we're going to kind of go through and get some more description on. So this is the putt she was talking about, and I'll let you go through it.
Yeah, I'm going to share a couple of different traditions. But so, as the town founders of Nazareth and Bethlehem, you can imagine that Christmas is important to the Moravians, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of traditions. I'm just going to share a few with you today. This first image is a detail of the Moravian puts that we have on display right now. So that for those of you who don't know, the Moravian puts, as Candace mentioned, it's a miniature landscape that tells the story of the Nativity. It's more than just a nativity. The word putz comes from the German word putzen, which means to decorate or clean. And this tradition really started in the family home, and as Candace also mentioned, the tradition grew. Every year they get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
The children would go out and collect the moss, the branches, the greenery, whatever was needed for the displays, and it really became kind of a family effort. So Moravian families would prepare these displays, and then they'd go putzing to view everybody else's displays.
It's kind of like what we do now with like looking at houses. I mean, not exactly the same, but
except people would open their homes and people would actually come through and look at them. So today people don't do that so much anymore, but the Moravian congregations have really taken over this practice of building a community putz where families and groups will cooperate to build a putz rather than in the individual homes. And as I mentioned, the Moravian Historical Society also has a display. So if you could go to the next slide. This is a slide of Jenny Trine with her puts. So Mrs. Trine began making her puts in 1908 in their house located in Nazareth. And that was the beginning of a tradition that would continue for nearly 60 years. And each year it got bigger and bigger. She was a true folk artist. She would make things out of whatever she had around her house. And so every year the display got bigger. So her living room became the location for really a unique puts every year, complete with lights, sound effects, and narration. That's the other thing that kind of sets us apart from a regular, like a normal nativity, I should say. There was always, it told the story of the birth of Christ. And it usually had lights and
the scale of that is just amazing.
Isn't it
like
crazy?
That's her whole room.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it went into the dining room, and then it spilled out onto the porch. I mean, like I said, over the years, it got bigger and bigger. So, it got so big that it would take visitors about 40 minutes to view it. She created more than 63 putzes in her lifetime, and we're estimating she welcomed probably 50,000 visitors to her home over the years. So pretty incredible tradition there.
Very neat.
Yeah. All right, so now we're looking at a Moravian star. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Moravian stars that hang on many of the porches in the Lehigh Valley. Many of our visitors to the museum here often ask about the history, so I thought I'd share a little bit of that with you. As the story goes, in early December of 1820, a teacher at a school in Germany developed a geometry lesson for the students there. They would use paper and glue to make a star-shaped polyhedron by attaching tall pyramids to a multifaceted geometrical shape. So the challenging math lesson yielded these beautiful stars, and the students would then use them as lanterns, and they soon, became very popular. They were just beautiful, and they became known as the Moravian stars. So an alumnus of the school began to make the stars, and he also provided instructions in his bookstore. That was around 1880. His son, Harry, went on to found the Herrenhut Star Factory in Germany. And although that factory was damaged in World War II, it still continues today to make stars in Herrenhut. And we sell them here in our gift shop. They're available in a few other places. And so we call those the original Moravian stars. You can, there's an example of one hanging over our front porch, but I'm sure you're familiar with the stars around here. So they can be as many as 110 points. Most of them are around 26 points, but I've seen some that are just really, really elaborate. So the Moravian churches in North America.
Like that one.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Is that one in the middle there? Wow. Yeah.
I don't know how many points, but that is just amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So the Moravian churches in North America and in Europe this is really the first sign that Christmas is approaching. It's the lighting of the Advent star. Moravian families hang these stars in their homes, and they light them from the beginning of the season of Advent, which is the fourth Sunday before Christmas, through Epiphany on January 6th. All right, so now we're going to talk about some treats because, of course, right, holidays, we love treats.
Exactly.
Yeah. So some of the best loved holiday treats in the Moravian traditions are the Christmas cookies, Moravian sugar cake, of course, and these Moravian mints. So they're also, of course, those paper thin ginger cookies are really popular today. Moravian sugar cake is a raised yeast dough that's covered with butter and brown sugar. I mean, what's not to love about that? We eat that all year round, not just at Christmas. But these Moravian mints really, I think they date back to the early colonial days, but they're still made today in the Moravian churches and in family homes. These family recipes are carefully passed on from family member to family member, so the tradition continues.
The Moravian sugar cookies are probably one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I love them. Yeah. All right. So speaking of Moravian, the sugar cake is often served at something that's called the Moravian Love Feast. The Moravian Love Feast is a tradition. Well, it actually goes way back, right to the beginning. So the holding of Love Feast is really kind of a unique tradition in the Moravian Church. Many congregations celebrate Christmas Eve with the Love Feast. It's really a non-sacramental part of the service, in which everybody shares a simple meal, usually a sugared bun and some coffee, or the children will get chocolate milk. There's singing that's going on while this is happening, and it's served by dieners, which is the German word for server. Okay. Go to the next slide, you'll see an example of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the dieners come out and serve the meal. The Love Feast, like I said, is primarily a song service opened with a prayer. And after everybody has been served and grace has been sung, you partake together. So this yeah.
Oh, can I go back?
The Love Feast, sorry.
Sorry.
This actually started. The Love Feast was revived in 1727. By Zinzendorf, and it really has just, the tradition is carried on ever since then. It was brought to America by the Moravians. So the actual food and drink can vary. So like if you're in the Caribbean, you might have tea instead of coffee. If you're in Africa, you might have peanuts instead of a sugar cake. But yeah, okay, we can go.
Interesting. Okay.
So I have to talk about the Christmas candle. This is also a really big tradition in the Moravian Church. So imagine the lights are dimmed, the candles are lit, and a little voice begins singing "Morning Star, oh cheering sight." It's Christmas Eve, and it's full of Moravian traditions. If you've ever been to a Moravian Christmas Eve service, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's one of the most beautiful things. Each worshiper is given a lighted beeswax candle trimmed in red. And the flame symbolizes the light of the world and the love of Jesus. The red fill his blood. The candles are brought in to a darkened sanctuary, gradually illuminating it as the candles are distributed. So the candles are tied with the ribbon first to give. They were first done. That first started in Germany, of course, in 1747. And the Moravians started doing this in Bethlehem as early as 1756. We have records of that.
Wow.
So, yeah, long tradition.
So not quite right in the beginning, but might as well have been
Yeah. So really from the beginning, the small lighted candles were made from beeswax. That's important. Beeswax is considered to be the purest of all the animal or vegetable waxes, suggesting the purity of Christ. And then the candle, giving its light as it's burned, suggests the sacrifice of the sinless Christ for the sinful humanity. So it's lots of symbolism attached to this little candle. So really, up until the end of the 19th century, only the children received candles in the service. Now everybody gets one. Right. And it's, as I mentioned, it's really a beautiful part of the service. When everyone lived within walking distance of the church, the children tried to keep the candle burning so that they could, when they got home, they could use it to light the candles on their Christmas tree.
Yeah,
So,
and then
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say this is our final photo.
Yeah.
This is a Christmas putz at the church.
It is. It's yeah, you'll see the lit candles being held up. So it's sort of everything in one there. And you'll see the Deaners coming out with the candles, the lit candles.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Did we go over, is there anything coming up that you wanted to talk about, or just make sure people go to the website?
Sure. Go to the website. Come visit our putz display. It's in the 1740 Gray Cottage, which is the oldest Moravian structure in North America. It's a really neat thing to see that. As I mentioned, our museum's open 7 days a week, except we are closed for a few days around Christmas. And then we've got a great special exhibit opening up in February. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. Susan, we're going to jump right over to Marie. And thank you so much for your patience in being our final, but certainly not least, presentation for this evening. Can you tell us a little bit about the Longswamp history and what we can learn more about that?
Okay, so the area called Longswamp, or Longswamp, because it was settled originally by mostly Germans, was opened to white settlers in 1734 and became a township a little over 250 years ago. And it's you'll find it right across the Lehigh County border in Berks. So if you know where Albertus or Brynicksville is, they kind of butt up against Longswamp Township. Today, still 70% of arable land is farmed. So it's very much, it's a rural community. There certainly are pockets of closely clustered houses, but there's still, like I say, plenty of farms. So.
All right. Do you want to just jump right into it here?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. You just you let me know when I'm changing slides.
I will do so, sir. Okay, so shooting in the new year became a popular thing to talk about. But it's actually the tail end of what was called in German the Neujahrswunsch, or the New Year's Wish. And it was a custom that was brought to America by German immigrants. I chose to lead with the shooting in the new year because the image is beautiful, and also shooting's more exciting than sounding than wishing is. I've looked through a bunch of research on this custom of the New Year's Wish, and everybody's pretty much thinking that even though it was brought over by Germans to America, it stuck best in Pennsylvania. It really was not all that widespread, like I say, as far as I can determine. And just like so many old world customs, it's now pretty much forgotten. But it does.
And what would they like? Is it just at New Year's when it hits midnight? They, instead of dropping a ball, they'll shoot guns in the air?
Yeah, well, let me just continue, and hopefully,
sorry.
Hopefully I can answer that question. So where am I here now? Okay, so the New Year's Wish is an example of how early Christian church leaders chose to create holidays, and they actually grafted them onto existing pagan festivals. In that way, they hope to encourage pagans to convert to Christianity. I'll talk about the pagan part again, but to answer your question, back in the day of this painting, which was done by Gladys Lutz, they would go home to home. And there's some variation in how they talked about it. Here in Longswamp Township, they would start at the crack of midnight, visit the first farm, do the wish and the shooting in of the new year, and then they would be invited in for refreshments, and then they go to the next farm, and it would be well into New Year's Day until they were finished.
Oh wow! So they go all night?
Yes. And in other places, they may have done it over several weeks, and that's kind of what's been done more recently. That answers your question. So if you look at the image on the screen, you see the wisher, in German Wünscher. He's holding a scroll of paper on the left, and he's standing alongside of the head of the household who's holding the lantern, and he is chanting a prayer for the new year. So, wishers could kind of make up their own script, but basically it's giving thanks to God for the year that's passed and the year ahead, and it offers a blessing on the household occupants. Sometimes wishers would extend it even to the animals in the barn. And then at the end of the chant, that's where the pagan part of this custom comes in, where you see here the entourage actually shooting off a round of fire. And that was at the point, that was like a 19th century version of the original custom, which was when the group that followed the wisher would costume themselves and wear masks to disguise themselves from any evil spirits that were lurking. And it was their job to bring along noisemakers of the day, which could be like pots and pans and wooden spoons. And after the wisher was finished, it was their job to make noise, because that would scare away the evil spirits, and it would allow the wish to descend then upon the household.
Interesting.
So in the 19th century, rifles became popular because that was a time when a lot of people actually owned them. And what I didn't know anything about this, even though my father's family is Pennsylvania German in heritage. And I find it so amusing that thousands of years later, we're still doing the same thing and don't realize that we're chasing away the evil spirits, only we're doing it with, party horns and spinners and fireworks. And once in a while, in those places like out here, you'll hear a firearm going off. But so, okay, unless you have a question for me, George, and I'm going to just ask you to move to the slide.
Sure,
okay.
here we go.
So here you have an example of a more modern day version of the wish being given in, and they would come into people's homes instead of standing outside. They would come in, and what you see here, this is another version of a frockdor, and obviously not religious in its design, but this was rendered in 2001 by Peter Fritsch, who spent his entire life here, and he took over the reins as the wisher for the township from his father, John. And so this would have been the late part of the 21st century, or 20th century rather. So like I say, invited into the home, we can only trace back 4 wishers. So there was John before Peter, and then there was another gentleman. But what we can find in the newspaper, old newspaper clippings and such, is that they had all traded in by then their pots and pans and rifles, given up on the idea that there was such a thing as evil spirits. And instead they chose to use musical instruments to make the noise after the wish. So here you see Peter sitting at his hammer dulcimer, his sister Peggy sitting to his right, and his nephew standing to his left. So what would happen is Peter would stand up, recite the wish. Again, it was still in the chant format because it's still a prayer. And then the group would play a musical number to usher in the new year, as it were. And then you see calligraphy that wraps around the foursome and the puppy laying on the floor. And that's actually the first line of the wish, which I've tried to translate faithfully to the right of this image. Now, sadly, we lost Peter in 2015, but the tradition still does continue. One of his later entourage members, Mike Herzog, is now the Vinscher for Longswamp Township, and his wife Linda acts as his entourage. They no longer visit houses as Peter and his entourage did, but they do perform at Longswamp area churches in December and January. And so the custom lives on. And if you would go to the next slide, please, George. If you're interested, anyone out there, about learning more about the New Year's Wish, you could come out to our website, which is up at the top of this slide. And, everything I have listed here, you'll find out there. So links to the English and the German version of the Longswamp Township Wish. There's a YouTube video out there that shows Peter actually doing his thing. That was recorded in 2009. And then you see the churches in the area where performances of the wish will happen following the church service. So all of that stuff's out on our website. I would say that the dates or the times listed here signify when the service begins. The service goes first and then the wish. So that's what I have for you.
Great. And like you said, all that information is also on your website, which we're looking at right
on
here.
that slide, people can get access to anything they might be interested in. I mean, in today's, Uber, singing, dancing, graphics, craziness to entertain people, it's kind of underwhelming, but the fact that, this is hundreds or even thousands of years old and it's still living in parts of America is kind of cool to me.
Well, somebody here from Albertus is now talking about
yes.
That explains the gunshots that still resonate on New Year's Eve.
I don't know that some people need a reason to be firing off their weapons.
This is a Tuesday.
But yeah, so like you listen on New Year's Eve, you're going to hear firecrackers out there, and you're going to hear the odd,
sure,
fire. And
it's interesting to know where that came from.
Well, I don't know that anyone knows where it came from. They just do it. That I just think it's amusing if people knew what the origins were, that they were scaring away evil spirits. That might strike
like it.
odd. Yeah, it's cool.
I think it's fun. So, well, I want to be respectful to everybody's time. So Susan and Marie, and of course Candace, who had to go. Thank you guys so much. It's sad this is the last one of the year, but we've had so much fun. We might be back next year. We'll see how that works out. Be sure to visit lvhistory.org. And thank you to everybody. Thank you, Susan and Marie. And thank you to everybody who watched. And again, thank you to Candace. And thank you to Lehigh Valley Passport to History. Lots of great things going on in the Lehigh Valley in 2023. And so check it out. Thank you guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you.